This is Ashley from the Lumber Word podcast. Real quickly before we jump in, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone listening and everybody that helps produce the podcast and is a member of the podcast. The growth of the Lumber Word has been incredible. We're consistently reaching hundreds of core listeners across the lumber supply chain every single week. And when you layer in YouTube, LinkedIn, and direct sharing, that expands to 1,500 to 3,500 plus industry impressions per episode. But here's the thing, we're not chasing millions of listeners. We're reaching the right hundreds. The people listening to this show are buyers, sellers, mills, builders, people moving real volumes of lumber and making real decisions every day. So if you've been listening, sharing this with your team, passing it around, we appreciate it. This is how this grows, and we're just getting started. We've got a great guest this week, and I wanted to give him the proper introduction. So there's a lot of people that I listen to on TV, read on the internet in different pundits, watch on the different cable shows, and that talk about the economy. And honestly, a lot of it's noise. You hear opinions, narratives, talking points, but not a lot are of real substance, or many of the people do not have data to back it up. That's not what you're getting today. We've got Brian Wesbury with us, Chief Economist at First Trust Advisors. And this is someone who operates at a completely different level. Not only is Brian a best-selling author, a regular on major business networks, and one of the most sought-after speakers in the country, but what really separates him is this. He backs everything up with data, with history, and with conviction. He doesn't just tell you what's happening, he explains why it's happening. And when you listen to Brian, you actually walk away understanding how the economic engine works, how policy works, housing, spending, and growth all connect. In a world full of surface-level takes, Brian goes 10x deeper. So if you want clarity, not noise, this is the one you need to pay attention to. Now, on to the episode.
Step into the game, we're talking wood and grain. Charles bring the heat on southern yellow pine. Mascot U.S. species, all is on the line. Gregg with the spruce, keeping knowledge divine. Ashen moderates, drops the facts to the booth. We on the buy, the sell ain't no hidden truths. Economics and trends, we got it all so clear. Lumber Word podcast, best believe we're here. If you wanna make more, get in on the score. Join us every week, you'll be hungry for more. Love it been keen though, who made known. Such rain Charleston, slide, plum ram known. Open to the scene, for the lumber supreme. Charles laying down facts with that southern yellow bling. Mac got that US swagger like strong timber beams. Gregg's insights on spruce, rewrite the themes. Got the buy side talk, we're stacking that flow. Selling knowledge, every week we still show. Join the Lumber Word crew, let your business grow. For the sharpest minds, here's where the place to go.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Lumber Word, episode number 163. Brian Wesbury is joining us again from First Trust. Brian, thanks for joining again.
Ashley, great to be with you and everyone else too.
So we ran all our stuff over the weekend when Gregg and I were in here, and you're pretty popular when we have our podcast. It really trends very well. we get a lot of viewers. And we figured Matt had texted you enough that we would finally see if Gregg could get you on here.
Yeah, it's a lot happened in the last 6 weeks. It's a little crazy.
Are you still in Denver right now, Brian, or are you in Naples?
I am in Denver.
Okay.
Yeah, if they in November, Colorado's going to vote on. We have a flat tax right now, 4.4%. So it's even a little bit better than Illinois. And they want to raise the top rate to 9.4, and I'm gone. If that happens, I'm out of here. Income tax. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, welcome to Oregon. We're already at 9.4.
Yeah, I know. And yes. And then everybody's putting in the millionaire taxes, Washington State and all that. All these, I'm amazed that these progressive states are like doubling down. It's amazing to me. I think we're really going to see dramatic changes in population, and well, we already are, but it's going to get worse. Like they kind of don't believe it. Like, did you see Kathy Hochul like in New York, 2 years ago, she's going, yeah, get out of here, go to Florida. I don't care. And now she's going, please come back. Like,
Did you
like,
you remember your time here in Portland giving your seminar, and your boss said that Portland looked better in his eyes, right?
yep,
Yeah, and it did. I mean, objectively, Portland does look better now,
yep.
having lived here. I heard this morning that the vacancy rate in downtown Portland is 40%.
Yeah, I believe it.
That doesn't lead to higher taxes.
So, and then we saw that the socialist mayor of New York is telling high-income people, you need to stay so that we can take your money and give it to the other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a pitch that'll really work. Will really work well.
Yeah. I have a feeling, like, this is just an observation, like, I may be right, I may be wrong, that social media and what you guys do, these podcasts, there's so much information out there now that's pushing these progressive governors and mayors to kind of say that stuff out loud. In other words, they can't get away with dancing around it and not having it reported. Everything's reported. And so then they just, well, this is going to, they believe their own echo chamber too. And they don't watch your podcast. So, but everybody else is learning. And
I'm not sure they do believe it, Brian. I don't think they even believe their own stuff. I think they're just committed to the team.
No, but see, I mean, like one of the major issues we have is everybody, whatever their worldview is, there is social media that feeds that reinforces it, and that's what they listen to. I mean, yeah. I routinely like to look at what the New York Times has to say. Mm-hmm. I even turn on MSLSD every once in a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, or certainly, and I actually think there's some stuff on CNN where there's some voice of reason. I mean, when you have Bill Maher being the far right of the Democratic Party, I mean, and he sounds so normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Gregg, I think you're right. And it kind of is what Matt just said. It's like we're tribes. We're broken into groups. People listen to their own echo chamber. And so you're probably right. The mayor of Chicago and the mayor of New York really do believe this stuff is going to work. But it's not. That's the thing. I mean, we look at how people are moving. I mean, they are leaving Illinois, leaving New York, leaving California, like in droves. And I mean, Texas is opening a stock exchange, and it's going to take all the business from New York. Like I'm convinced it's going to become the biggest stock exchange maybe in the world, because it is America. But they're going to win. And Musk helped start that, and he moved from Delaware and all that stuff. And it's just going to keep happening because they don't get it yet.
Yeah. What happens when they take over Texas?
Yeah.
Or Florida?
Yeah. Hey, Brian, I mean, I know, you've talked about this a lot, but when you talk about people like the raising taxes, I guess, the two things is talk about, the slice of the pie that government takes. And, I mean, I did see where federal employment fell 12% last year.
Yep.
But it's still really above its trend of pre-COVID. I guess my biggest disappointment is that it seems like the whole Doge movement has petered out, lost any energy at all.
What happened to Big Balls? The guy, like, is he gone now? And all these,
yeah. I think they're still around there. The one thing is these judges keep saying what they want to do, like get rid of, NGOs and USAID. Judges are coming and saying you can't do that. And then we got to go to the Supreme Court. And I think we'll eventually win those battles, but it's going slow. What happened fast, and Gregg, you just hit on it, there's 360,000 fewer government employees, bureaucrats right now, and that's real progress. But the spending levels haven't come down. And and that's what really bothers me, because I don't necessarily, I obviously look at the tax rate that a state's going to charge me, and then I'm going to move to some place where it's better or something like that. But even the Democrats right now are trying to cut taxes nationwide, not on the wealthy, but on, they want to get rid of them more on the lower end. So everybody's set on, we can't take taxes higher nationally, but spending hasn't come down. And Greg, I think what you were referring to is I believe this to the bottom of my heart. This is where affordability, this is why we have a problem with affordability. And that is, federal government spends 24% of GDP. The state and local governments spend 20% of GDP. And then the cost of regulation for all of us to comply with all the regulations that are out there. Everybody, to your landscaper who has to have 25 pieces of paper for every chemical in his truck or something. And that's 7% of GDP. So 24 plus 20 plus 7 is 51% of GDP, of our output, the government takes, which means we only have 49% left to buy a house, to buy a car, to send our kids to college. No wonder things aren't affordable, because government redirects the other 50%, 51% in this case. And no wonder, I believe that's why things aren't affordable, because we only take home half of what we produce.
I have two questions for you, for everybody. One is, what percentage of the gross collections from the government that we have to pay, either state or federal, do you think is accounted for by fraud? 20%, 30%, 10%. There's one question. Then the other question is, Brian, if the U.S. Treasury can just print up trillions of dollars and do QE and all this stuff, why are we paying taxes?
Yeah. So really good question. That's the question for all the MMT people, right? Modern monetary theory. That's what they say. You can print as much as you want, spend as much. In fact, the economy's better off when we run massive deficits where we print money. And it's a really good question. And I wish I had a good number for fraud. I'm going to say it's 20% minimum. And one of the reason for that is everybody's figured out how to game the system. And when you have $7 trillion of federal government spending, everybody learned how to game the system, and even the politicians too. And they're using that money to buy votes, and people will accept the money to sell their vote. And we have to cut the size of government. But Republicans seem to not be able to do it. Democrats obviously don't want to do it. So I don't know how we do that, but that's the only way that we're going to get back to any kind of what I would call normalcy. The last 20 years, real GDP has only grown 2% a year. And that's half of what we grew in the 1800s, and all the way up through 1965. We were growing over 4%. And now it's 2%, even with all these unbelievable technologies. We should be growing faster, but government is taking away the air, taking the air out of the economy, and we're only getting 2% growth. It's really hard to increase living standards rapidly when you only grow 2% a year. That's like European numbers.
Yeah.
I guess we want to, since we're kind of like lumber, this is a lumber word. So we want to talk about, we can talk about the prices of lumber, but you can tell us about the demand for lumber and what the outlook is for this year for home sales, housing starts, et cetera, from your vantage point.
Yeah. We just got new home sales data, and we have more completed homes. Like builders, it looked like what they did is, instead of starting new homes, they completed everything that they were working on. and we have more completed homes than we have since, like, as a share of all the housing out there, than we have since '09. And we all know why it happened in '09, because sales just crashed. And so to me, the building outlook, when everybody's completed them and they're just sitting there waiting to be sold, are you really going to start a lot more? And I'm worried about our economy. I still don't think we've paid the price for COVID. I mean, how do you lock down an economy and then have everybody still think everything's okay? And it goes back to what Matt just said, and it's because we printed all that money, we borrowed all that money, handed it all out, and now the deficit isn't going up anymore. It's not going down, but it isn't going up, and the money supply has been like pretty slow the last 3 years. And I just feel like we're going to pay an economic price for that. So if you have all these completed homes and a slower growing economy, I I just look. I don't know. I don't know what you're seeing with the demand for lumber, but I would imagine it's on the weak side.
One question, since we're in a supply chain in the lumber business, and
Yep.
we've over the last 3 months, and you could arguably say, yeah, it's almost since the beginning of the year, we've had a lot of trucking and logistical issues. Truck freights have doubled in some cases,
Hmm.
and it's not just us; it's across the whole supply chain. I could say the general public thinks the excuse is oil is up, but there's probably a lot of underlying issues that more people are afraid of creating supply chains, maybe in other countries that are on, and there's more need for distribution and supply chains back in the United States, or what. I, I guess we're still trying to figure it out, as we were paying twice as much for trucks today that we when we booked them 3 weeks ago, right? And like
Yeah.
what is the issue there? Why is this happening?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's lately it's oil prices. What's that been going on 40 days now? But I think that one of the biggest, we have net zero immigration right now. And that's been true for the past year. And I think a lot of those people that were emigrating, legally or illegally or whatever, went into the transportation business. And I mean, I think I'm right about that. I know that what you hear is the crazy stories about a driver with no, paid for his, like, bribed his way to his license and then killed a family. Those are the things you hear about. But I think there were, when I hear people talking to me from docks or railroad unloading facilities, they're saying things like 30, 40, 50% of all the drivers were illegal.
Hmm.
And I mean, at least I've heard some people say that. I don't, that's just anecdotal evidence. I don't have any proof, but I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, there's,
Yeah,
there's
well,
certain,
to kind of circle back around on the whole lumber demand side, Brian, this is our seasonal strength time of year, starting in
Hmm.
December, I guess, and going into about May, sometimes June, but typically this is sort of the last, say, 2 months period of seasonal demand increases just based on time of year and weather. I would say, based on all of our conversations so far year to date, it seems as though most of the business is coming from the South
Hmm.
and the upper tier, the upper Midwest, the Northeast has been decent, but I mean, it seems like the real high volume demand has been coming mostly from the South and really from, say, Texas over to Florida, Georgia seems to be where the real driver of it is. I mean, we do plenty of business on the West Coast out here at Hampton too, but the real big takeaway has been in that region that I'm talking about. So now the question is, how is demand going to unfold in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Maine, when their summer and their spring really comes, and that's about now, right? That's that's
Hmm.
that's just about now. So we'll see how that plays out. I have mixed emotions about it. I mean, I've been surprised by how good the demand has been in those other markets in the South. but I've also been a little bit surprised by the lack of demand coming out of the upper tier, the northern tier states too. So it's a question mark that I don't have an answer to.
So one of the interesting things, and Brian, you talked about housing completions, and those are disproportionately across all those areas that Matt says have been stronger. And if you look at, kind of the three-leg stool of housing is housing affordability. It's the price of homes, and its incomes and its interest rates. Interest rates just had a little bit of a blip up after hitting, kind of a bit of a low sub 6%. But what we're seeing is in all of those southern markets where all the completions are, the prices there are come down more and have increased on the affordability side.
Right.
I did see where the hottest housing market in the country right now is apparently Hartford, Connecticut. Shocker.
Yeah,
We didn't know
too.
that, but you saw that article.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that if what we're seeing today with oil, and if things hold and oil drifts back down, into the 80s, I think that'll be a pretty positive backdrop for the economy overall. And, if that coincides with long-term rates falling back below 6%, I think the spring selling season should be pretty solid.
Yeah. I mean, it has been amazing to me. I mean, I made my case, at least short case for, I think the economy has to slow down because we never really paid a price for COVID. But for some reason, the data it stays strong. And it's really kind of, even with, we've only averaged 42,000 jobs a month for the last 17, 18 months. And I mean, we all remember when you needed 200,000 jobs a month, to be a growing economy. And now it's 42. So it's just amazing to me that retail sales stays so strong. Durable goods orders are still up. The ISM surveys are up. I'm amazed at the resiliency of this economy, and especially in the face of tariffs too, and zero net immigration. I mean, to me, it's amazing. And
it's AI. It's AI.
Yeah,
it's the power of the American consumer.
It's AI.
Hey, Charles, what were you going to ask?
No, I was going to say, I mean, my question for that, right? If you look at it from a, 200,000 job scenario to a 42,000 job scenario, right? I mean, some of these moves and these people buying houses and what have you, I mean, could that be, to your point, Brian, paying for COVID, so to speak? There's a lot of people that have a killer amount of equity in their house, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So is that a piece that is influencing some of the consumption?
Yep. I totally believe so. So we've all heard of the K-shaped economy, right? I always think that's kind of cute. It's like somebody found a way to talk about it, but it's really just talking about inequality. All right. And the upper income, like what the Federal Reserve did, and this goes back to Matt just saying, hey, we can just print whatever we want. We tripled the money supply in 18 years. So it started in 2008. That was our first QE with the great financial crisis. Then we doubled down on it during COVID. And that means if you owned a home or if you owned assets, you won, like huge, like you win. Baby boomers won. Why? Because we've worked. I mean, we've worked for 40 years and saved and, have assets. And Gen Z hates us now, like because they didn't have assets and they didn't win. And so what I've seen now is that bifurcation, that inequality is even getting worse because you didn't have assets, you didn't get that gain, you're paying 3x more for meat, you're paying more for housing, you're paying more for everything because of the inflation. And so what we're seeing is credit card defaults, student loan defaults have kicked in again, auto loan defaults have kicked in. The one thing that isn't up is defaults on mortgages. And I'm going to steal one of my number two, Bob Stein. He has a line. He's like, if you have a 3% or less mortgage, you will open a crack den in your basement to keep your mortgage payments flowing, but you'll give up your credit cards and your auto loan and everything else. But then so that's the bottom of the K. The top of the K would be the baby boomers, the people that have assets. And right now, even with the really nice pop in the market we've gotten in the last 24 hours because of the end of because of the ceasefire, the S&P 500 is still where it was 8 months ago. And housing prices have slowed down. They're up, 2% in the past year. And so that wealth effect spending, if it slows, how long does the market have to go flat before people stop spending their stock gains on, like new houses or Four Seasons hotels or trips to Barbados or whatever, or retail sales, which have continued really strong. And so I think if this market doesn't keep up with its 10, 15, 20% gains per year, I think we lose the top of the K. And then we've already kind of lost the bottom of the K. And when you put those two things together, that's another reason why I expect a slower economy in this next 12 months. It's just
so it was interesting. It was interesting that I was seeing several articles in the last few days about highlighting the increase in the middle class and how the American dream is still here. And I mean, the underlying in those arguments is the two things that prevent that from growing more. One is the high level of taxation, because listen, once you're rich, you're already there, but the high levels of taxation, that hurts the people that are trying to accumulate assets, correct?
Right.
But and then the flip side is that as we whether it's eliminating fraud or just eliminating the disincentive not to work and save and invest through whatever social safety net programs exist, that because that, like, my whole underlying thesis is so many of the things that we do, quote unquote, to be to take care of people on the low end ends up hurting them, because we take away their self-respect, because we make them dependent on the government. And so when you get things for free, you expect more things for free, but it has less value.
The lumber market can be unpredictable, but with the right tools, you can make confident decisions. Fast Markets is the trusted home of the Random Lengths Weekly Report, providing detailed pricing for over 1,600 products, including softwood lumber, structural panels, and more across North America. As for hardwood markets, the Hardwood Market Report is your go-to source for pricing benchmarks, market commentary, and in-depth monthly insights through HMR Executive. These resources give you clarity in a complex market, helping you stay informed and prepared. Fast Market's Random Lengths price assessments are derived from verified price inputs collected via online submission forms, authenticated physical documentation, and interactions with buyers and sellers across the supply chain. All data is evaluated within Fast Market's proprietary assessment platform, Mind, in strict accordance with our published methodologies. Each assessment undergoes a rigorous approval process prior to publication. Key benchmark commodities are subject to independent third-party audits to ensure alignment with Fast Market's methodologies and compliance with IOSCO principles for price reporting agencies. Get started with Fast Markets today. Visit fastmarkets.com/lumbertalk to find out more.
So, to the extent we cut programs on that end and incent people to be and join, the middle class America, and we decrease taxes so that more people can keep more of their money. So that's kind of my
the bottom 50% of this
side of it.
Yeah, the bottom half of the United States income earners don't pay taxes. Like, they don't pay federal taxes. They might pay some state and sales taxes and stuff, but and then another 25% actually get refunds, even if they pay no taxes. So we're actually paying people, your money that you pay for taxes, Gregg, is going to go to somebody else that doesn't make very much money. And the federal government says, here, you get a refund.
Yeah,
I have a
exactly.
family member that's on the dole, so I feel like I'm just passing it along to him.
I mean, I have no
I know
problem
nobody else
with.
probably has that in their family, so
I'm
I
probably
do.
a little bit more in the middle on this one, but I do believe that the government has a role to play in helping out people that are in hard times. But I think the problem becomes when government employees and agencies decide that the next step or two or three up the chain of income needs that also. And so then you start to see fraudulent claims. Like I remember I went into a butcher shop years ago and some lady pulls up in a brand new Mercedes, a $90,000 car. She's dressed to the nines. She's got diamonds all over. She used food stamps to buy $150 worth of meat. And I'm like, that obviously is not a person that needs food stamps, right? I mean, so to me, that was, I mean, if we could get that out of it, that would, where the money goes to the right people and not to the wrong people, then we probably save quite a bit of money. Like we wouldn't need to tax as much, or we wouldn't need to refund as much. We could actually, I'd love to see AI being used to actually identify who are the people that really need the money.
Yeah.
And then get it to them directly, make it a lot cleaner. There's too much muddy, murky gray area in our system. It just is not efficient.
Yeah.
I think that's by design also, by the way, but that's another topic.
Well, that is true. Let me just talk real quickly about two things you guys just said. Gregg, you were talking about that. I think it came from AEI, American Enterprise Institute. I looked at the study. I need to look at it closer. But in 1979, 10% of people were considered an upper middle class. And now it's 31%. And the question is, like, what is that data really telling us? And I looked at some of their charts. I need to get the underlying data. But remember, 1979 was the land of 13% inflation. We ended up with 21% interest rates. It was two of the worst recessions in 80 and 81 that we've ever had. And then Reagan cut taxes massively, from a top rate of 70% to a top rate of 28%. Volcker got inflation under control. Interest rates plummeted. The economy almost grew 4% a year for 20 years. By the end of that period, Clinton had us in a surplus. All right. And so I think most of that growth in the upper middle class happened in those 20 years. Because we went from so bad, Carter bad, to Reagan, Clinton good, that I think it pulled a lot of people, it raised all boats. And so I think that's one thing. And then to talk, Matt, you just said something I think that's really interesting. There are hopeless, feckless, luckless people in this world. Like they can't do anything right. For whatever reason, maybe it's their fault. Maybe they're an alcoholic. Maybe they're a drug addict. Maybe they have real serious health problems. But there are people that are like that. And I think our safety nets should be designed to help them, which is what you just said. The question I would have is how many of those people are there? Out of 100 people, how many are there? And I would say at most 5. All right. 5 out of 100 people are truly hopeless, luckless, and feckless. Well, right now, our federal government, 19% of all income comes from the federal government. 19, which means we have 19 people in the wagon, not 5, not 4, not 3, and 81 people are pulling 19. And so back when it was 97 pulling 3, we could grow 4% a year. Now we have 81 pulling 19, and that's why we're only growing 2% a year. And so somehow people have snuck into the wagon. And then to make this square the circle, go back to something Gregg said. If you're in the wagon and you're not supposed to be in the wagon, your soul is dying.
Yeah.
Because we're put on earth, in my opinion, to be of service to other people. And if all you want is other people to be of service to you, you're no wonder your soul dies. Like you're not productive. You're not helping anyone. You're not joining in community and in society. And so it's a huge problem. It's more than just growth. It's truly undermining like civilization.
Didn't our society create that as far as accepting it? I mean,
It did.
and you go back to baby boomers and having assets. And I mean, and I don't mean this as a joke, guys, but like I'm a lot younger than everybody here, right? And my generation is very, social media centric for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of people in my generation too that kind of fall into that. You may not have to be in the wagon, but you're in the wagon, or you're, utilizing the wealth effect as you described. And the sense of responsibility has been completely diminished from a societal standard, from the way I see it, for the most part.
Yeah, it's like accepted.
From a 65% perspective, it's I'll just live by the seat of my pants. If I'm going to go buy a new camper or new $40,000 side by side, I'm going to go do it because I can pull out equity in my house and everything will always be fine. Instead of, oh shit, I just lost my job. What do I do now? Right.
Right.
How are my kids going to eat? So, just society as a whole, and some of the economic factors that you are mentioning are quite honestly crazy to me. Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm a first generation born in America. My father came over from Cuba, a communist country. And, all I know,
we're going to get it back. Don't worry. We're going to get it back for you.
But it's, but it's just kind of crazy though, because I read all this stuff, and I mean, I'm a lumber guy. I trade a couple other cash commodities, and all I do is look at price charts. And sometimes I sit back and listen to the guys that did at my age were reading paper newspapers, which is y'all, and you actually read.
I still get it delivered to the house.
Yeah.
But I mean, but you read news articles, right? Like
we read all the time.
I get news in 30 seconds or less, and then we kind of move on. But it's kind of crazy because those affordability factors and some of the extremes or so-called extremes that you've mentioned, right, are really, really affecting what we do as a whole, right? I mean, just like people say, well, it wasn't like that when I was your age, right? I get that all the time. But
I mean, nothing stays the same, Charles.
I mean,
right? I mean,
I agree,
the world's always changing, and so
it's kind of heartbreaking though from a human standpoint. I mean, it really is.
The toughest thing for people to wrap their head around today in this environment that you're just discussing, where the cost of entry into the game is so expensive, especially if you live in a place like Chicago or New York or Portland or LA or San Francisco, these historically blue cities, blue states with high costs of tax rates and high, we have urban growth boundaries. So our real estate prices are artificially inflated, things like that make it difficult for people my children's age, 24, 20, to go buy a house for their first time. And my first house cost $149,000 in 1995. And that same house is now worth $800,000 in Portland. And so my kids can't afford that. Right. And I think this is the point I'm trying to get to, is that if the young people want to accept a hard truth, they should act like they're super wealthy. The guys that have multiple homes in multiple states and can decide that they don't like that new millionaire wealth tax that Washington's going to put into place, and they're just going to move to Texas or Idaho instead. And these young people should act like they're multimillionaires and that they've got multiple options, and they should just move to Indiana. They should move to Oklahoma. They should move to Kansas or South Carolina. Start out your life.
No, we don't need it. We're full, man.
Just go somewhere cheaper. Like, you don't have to live in Oregon. Just because you were raised here doesn't mean you have to stay here, right? Go. America's a big place. There's lots of places that you can check out that are cheaper that you might fall in love with. Get on the road. Go drive around, travel around.
South Carolina,
find a place
baby.
to live that does not cost you $800,000 to get a starter home. And that's the hard truth.
Ash.
So how many people have got on this wagon in the last 7 years since we created all this money? And I mean, I'm getting a theme here. You create money to, in essence, help people, and it creates widespread fraud and more people jumping on the wagon.
Inflation.
And inflation, when we pull the money supply back a little bit, isn't the fear then that, oh God, if people get off the wagon, we're going to have an uprising, or it seemed like nobody wants to take the bitter pill and just deal with it.
Just to answer your question directly, 18 years ago, it was about 13% of the people, 13% of income came from government. Now it's 19. And it really jumped during COVID. And the surprising thing is it didn't come back down, because I was expecting it to come back down sharply, because a lot of that was one-time payments to sit at home, and it didn't. It permanently stayed higher. And we now have 45 million people on food stamps and all that kind of stuff.
But we're down to 41 to 42 million. So we have had a decrease. My point to you, Brian, is of those 42 million, how many of them really should be on food stamps?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to. It's like, well, how many hopeless, luckless, feckless people are there? And I mean, there are people that, the Bible says we are a brother's keeper. I mean, we are. And so those are the people that I want to help. But it's way less than 42 million. Here's a but to answer,
Brian, in 2008 there was 28 million people. So in that time period, we've gone, it's a 50% increase.
Yeah. Ashley, here's my answer to your question. When Ronald Reagan came into office, he ended up slashing tax rates, slowing down government spending. Bill Clinton was finally forced by, Newt Gingrich shut the economy down. I won't go through the whole story, but what he did, it was the end of welfare as we know it. That was the quote. And what he did is he said, you can only be on welfare for 2 years. You got to get a job. And if you're not looking for a job, you can't have welfare. And what happened is the number of people in the wagon actually went down. But you need growth to do it. And Reagan and Clinton had 3.8% average annual growth from 1980 to 2000. Almost 4% growth. And then since then, we've been down to 2% growth. So no wonder the wagon is filling up. It's like harder to get ahead.
What happens when Elon Musk's prediction of AI taking out all these jobs comes into fruition in a few years?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, what's to stop him from
the same thing that happened when the automobile was going to put all of the blacksmiths out of business? It's the same thing. Everybody's going to figure out, like, there's going to be as many jobs that are destroyed, new jobs will be created.
Yeah, let's hope that there's more. Right.
That's what will happen. And as you move like from more into a more broad information economy, those jobs will be higher paying and higher value and increase productivity across the board.
How is that going to affect what Brian does?
Maybe it's Pollyanna, but it's
Brian.
Certainly
what's that?
How is AI going to affect what you guys do for a living? I mean, you guys are at the top of the food chain. You're like the lumber producers. You're like the mill. You guys come up with these financial packages and you're creating these things of value that your investor class subscribes to, right? You're the producer. So how's this AI going to change what you guys do in the future in your opinion?
Yeah, it's going to change. I think it's going to change just about everything. But here's some of my big worries, and that is, I ask AI things like, could you write the Constitution? And the only one that gave me an honest answer was Perplexity, and it said no, because we don't live at the time. We know what they read. We've read way more, scraped the internet for way more. And so, no, we couldn't do it. And then you ask these other ones and they're like, oh yeah, like we'd read Hume and we'd read Adam Smith, but the New York Times is there too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want that Constitution. We read John Locke and, Aristotle and the New York Times and CNN. And so, but, so what I worry about is I sort of think, I mean, whenever you search Google for like solar, wind energy, alternative energy, whatever environmentally clean energy, it comes up with all these statistics, which I don't believe. I do not believe solar and wind are cheaper. I mean, Germany got rid of all of their nuclear energy. And so what I get worried about is that AI will amplify errors and political truths, and then have everybody kind of like, that's the truth. Like everybody will believe AI has the truth, but it'll start censoring itself. Like if AI was in charge of the COVID response, would it have said we all need to wear masks and get the vaccine and distance and kids need to be protected, like, and have the vaccine so they don't get it? Would have said the same thing that we got during COVID. And so if you fill up the information, all it does is scrape the internet. And if it's filled up with untruths,
Yeah.
I get really worried about the output, so it's garbage in, garbage out.
But aren't you, I mean, like I'm worried about that when I look at Real Clear Politics and I look at the headlines on 12 different news media outlets, and I see that 80% of them are misrepresenting or skewing what is, or representing facts, what are really opinions about facts, right? I
Right.
mean, that's what happens all day, every day. And that's why we're still incumbent on like thinking on our own.
Yeah.
AI is great to do things faster than we can do. AI is
Right.
not great for giving us complex, like philosophical answers to underlying things. And just the only thing that I worry about with AI, one thing: when will Skynet become self-aware? And for all of the people that are a little bit younger that listen to the podcast, go watch the first Terminator movie. It'll change your life.
Then watch Terminator 2, because that's when Skynet becomes alive.
Yeah.
Question on affordability for houses, just to bring it, like if I kick this three-legged stool of rates, price, or real wages, and as I sit and look at my phone for 6 hours a night watching YouTube short clips, and I see all these influencers telling everybody to not buy a house now, they should just rent because buying a house is a bad idea and you should wait for them to fall 50% before you buy something. And I remember going back to 1999 or 2000 when I used to go into the office with Gregg at 6 a.m. on Saturdays, and I'd be like, man, I'm just waiting for prices to drop. And he's like, housing is like farmland. He used to always say, it moves up and then it just sits there, right? Like I see a lot of people out there trying to time a market, and that's really strapping the mask on. And I think that's just an impossible task, right? Like a fool's errand to do it. So for everybody out there that's trying to figure out if they should buy a house,
to be in to win.
I mean, well, there are affordable houses by Chicago. You just have to go west or northwest 30 or 40 miles, right? And travel a little farther. So is there a better time to rent than buy, or is there what are we looking at versus rent versus buying currently? What trends do you see coming forward?
If you really go back, there's only one time I know of, maybe the Great Depression. I didn't study housing during that very well, but there's only one time I know that was a bad time to buy a house. That was 05, 06, 07. And then they fell 40, 50%. But other than that, and they've fully recovered now. So you just had to hold on. The question is just when people got adjustable rate mortgages in 04, 05, 06, that was crazy.
Yeah.
And
no money down.
Yeah. And today we don't have that. We don't have that. So Gregg's right. When you print 42% more money during COVID and the price of an average house goes up 42%, that's a permanent increase. And and so no, this is not a bad time. We haven't overbuilt. in 15 years. We did in '05, '04, '06. We have not overbuilt.
Yeah.
I think real incomes will come up. I mean, I'm going to tell you, today as a macro economist, it is more confusing, and there's so many balls in the air than I've ever seen it, right? Are tariffs, are they actually causing reshoring? I don't see a ton of evidence other than in the data center world. Is this? I personally think going after Iran it's going to change the world for the better. Ash, you mentioned foreign countries. Germany is. I think this war in Iran has exposed Europe like never before. They can't get they have to buy oil from us. West Texas is now above Brent because they're buying our oil because they can't get it through the strait. And so I think it's exposed them. I wouldn't be surprised to see Germany reopen nuclear. I mean, they went from a lot of kilowatts, I forget how many, of output with nuclear to zero. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them reopen it and rethink their windmills and their solar panels and all of that stuff. And and then AI, if it really does boost productivity, let's go with Gregg's. It's not, as long as it's not Skynet, it's going to boost productivity. Tariffs cause reshoring, then you get real wage growth, and that supports housing even more. And so, no, I don't think this is a bad time to buy a house, even if we slow down a little, because houses aren't massively overvalued like they were in '05 and '06 and '07. They were back then. Compare them to rents, compare them to construction costs, all those different ways. When you look back with 2020 hindsight, yeah, it was a problem in '05, '06, '07. Today, it's not.
What do you think of we have a new Fed chair coming up?
Yep.
When's that going to happen, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, supposedly it's going to happen in May, except Senator Tillis is withholding his vote, or whatever, pink slip, blue slip, whatever they call that stuff, because he wants Trump to drop the legal case against Powell, because Trump is suing Powell, or the DOJ is, for lying about construction cost of his new building. And so as long as that thing is there, Tillis is going to withhold his vote, and Warsh can't get through. So technically it's supposed to be in May.
Well, what happens when Warsh finally gets in there? What's your read on him?
He's going to shrink the balance sheet, which is tightening. And then if he offsets that a little bit with lower rates, that might work. But right now, inflation, 2.5%, 3%. That's where it is right now. I don't think it's accelerating dramatically. I don't think it's decelerating dramatically. And if inflation is 2.5% to 3%, then short rates at 3 3/4 are about right. Maybe we have room for a quarter or even 50 basis points of cutting, but that's about it. He's not taking rates back to 1%. I just don't believe it. And he wants to shrink the balance sheet, which will, they have to do it in the right way, and they have to reduce regulations on banks. Oh, that's another thing.
Brian, can't they shrink that balance sheet with the offset being all of the excess reserves that banks currently have? I mean, can't that just kind of wash?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You get the Fed issued the reserves, the banks bought them, and then the Fed bought bonds with those reserves. And so what you do is you switch it. You give whoa.
You just switched it.
I had an earthquake. That was an earthquake. I'm throwing my hands around. So what you end up doing is having the banks hold the bonds and the Fed take the reserves back, and they basically can almost extinguish them. But the banks banks will have more risk on their balance sheet. They'll have less liquidity, and so you have to reduce the liquidity rules on banks. I mean, I know I've talked about it on here before, and I won't go into a big long thing, but QE by its very nature is inflationary, right? Because what I'm doing is I'm filling the banks up with cash.
Yeah.
And so how do you stop it from being inflationary? Well, you put liquidity rules on banks. You make them hold the reserves. You make them hold like the cash. You raise their capital requirements. And right now the Fed's talking about reducing all of those, which will make money more available. Even if they swap the bonds for reserves, they can actually reduce the reserve requirements, liquidity rules, capital requirements enough to make money a little bit easier. And I think that's what Warsh is going to do. He wants the bonds back on banks' books, and he wants the Fed out of the business of financing government spending.
I'm glad that you admitted that you've never had so many difficult angles to look at as a macroeconomist, because we've been going back and forth on this show here for 3+ months as to where we think lumber ultimately is going.
Yeah.
And, we've moved in that time period. We've moved up. So we start out, I think we're probably up about $100 to $150 a thousand over the last 5 months, roughly, which is about a 25-30% increase in the cost of the goods for lumber. And now we're kind of wondering, where do we go from here, right? Because we're going to go back into the doldrums of the summer, the hot months, and, just maybe you slow down your building activity a little bit when it's 112 degrees outside. But so, and we've also lost a lot of production in lumber over the last 12 months too. So all these things combined we are in the same boat as you, Brian, and it makes me feel a little bit better to know that somebody with your pedigree is feeling the same way.
Oh, yeah.
With that being said, do you guys even want to talk about lumber, or you just want to wrap this up?
We're just going to go behind the paywall for people. No, Ash, you want to talk about that?
Thanks for being on.
Carry.
There we
Cheers.
go.
All right.
Good to see
Thanks,
you,
Brian. Appreciate it, man.
All right.
Great to
Thank
see
you.
as always.
Thanks, Brian.
All right.
All right, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.